The U.S. Embassy is working to evacuate American citizens from Israel, and U.S. airlines are suspending passenger flights to the Middle East because of escalating war in the area.
In the meantime, Senate Republicans have unveiled their proposed changes to President Trump's spending plan as the fight continues over so-called SALT tax deductions. New Jersey Democratic Senator Andy Kim has a lot to say about that, and he is joining us this morning to weigh in on these issues. So good morning, Senator. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me this morning.
Let's start with what's going on between Israel and Iran, the strikes between the two countries. What happens if the U.S. gets more involved, and what's at stake?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, we should be doing everything we can to get American citizens out of the region. I used to work in diplomacy at embassies abroad, worked in war zones in Afghanistan. I know how precarious this is. But look, this is a moment where we have to be very careful about our next steps. We don't want to get embroiled in a new war in the Middle East. People in my state don't want to see that. But look, we also want to make sure that Iran does not get access to a nuclear weapon. We need to make sure that we stand up. I worked for years to counter Iranian violence throughout the region. It would be a game changer if they were able to get a nuclear weapon. I'm hopeful that we can make a push on diplomacy, be able to get an agreement there that can keep people safe and keep us out of war.
No doubt this must be a hot topic in the Senate right now. What are your colleagues saying about the path forward potentially here?
Yeah, I think a lot of people right now understand just the gravity of this moment. And we are demanding answers. I mean, I think the American people deserve answers, not just how much is this going to cost, but if we do get engaged, how does this not turn into another war in Iraq, which was an absolute catastrophe? How do we try to ensure that we are keeping Americans safe from any type of retaliation that could occur abroad or here at home? These are answers that the American people don't have right now, and that's exactly why the Constitution puts the authority to declare war with Congress, because we are the ones that represent the people directly in that vein. So that is what we're pushing for. I've heard bipartisanship for that type of approach. Hopefully we can be able to do so, and we're engaged with conversations with the White House to try to make sure that the American people understand the decisions before them and that this is not something where we shoot from the hip at this incredibly dangerous moment.
Okay, Senator Kim, let's switch gears and talk about what the president calls his big, beautiful bill. Republicans released some of the changes that they'd like to see made, some of them benefiting big businesses and also the wealthy. How are families, middle-class families, going to benefit, if at all?
It's going to be devastating. I'll be honest, I've been now in Congress about 6.5 years. This is the most dangerous piece of legislation I've ever seen in my time in politics in Congress, in part because right now, the Congressional Budget Office estimates 16 million Americans will lose their health care. I mean, that is devastating. Not just those on Medicaid, not just those on the Affordable Care Act marketplace, but I've talked to some hospital leaders in New Jersey. They're saying that if this bill goes through, their hospitals might not be able to stay open because of the huge reductions in reimbursements. That would hurt everybody. We're talking about skyrocketing healthcare costs. We're talking about reductions in food assistance. I mean, I was a Pell Grant student, reductions in Pell Grant in ways in which we can make sure that we're providing education for kids. These are the types of problems that we're seeing left and right, and I think that's incredibly dangerous at this moment. So a lot of families will struggle, and then you ask, well, what's on the other side of the equation? Who benefits from this? And unfortunately, it's really just the wealthiest of the wealthy, the 0.1%. They would get over $400,000 in tax breaks, where the rest of us are not only going to see our costs increase, but not get any of the benefits on our front.
Another area of concern, the SALT deductions, which benefit many homeowners in our area. Where are lawmakers standing on that at this moment? Yeah,
well, look, I mean, I think the Senate's making things even worse. But I'll be honest, there's a very simple fix to this, which is just we don't have to do anything when it comes to this. The SALT tax cap expires at the end of the year. So, the Republicans are tripping over themselves. Oh, well, we'll lift the cap to this number or that number. That'll fix it. No, you just don't have to do anything when it comes to these SALT tax. Just let it expire. Let us be able to go back to where it was, before Trump imposed this upon us to start with. That's the right answer. And anything else is just political posturing.
All right, now let's switch gears again. Senator, let's talk about ICE now limiting congressional visits to some of those immigration centers. Now, you went to the Delaney Center in Newark. Can you tell us what you saw there?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's incredibly important for congressional oversight. not only is it important, it is the law. ICE does not have the ability to stop us from being able to go and inspect. Now, when it comes to Delaney, at that particular moment, it was a crime scene because they literally had 4 detainees escape. So I wasn't able to go around and see everything. But what I will say is I should have been able to, as I did, go and talk to them about what had happened because this was a concern to the community. There were 4 detainees at large. We didn't know who they were. And ICE wasn't saying anything. And when I went there and talked to them about it, I learned something, which is that the exterior wall at Delaney Hall was made of basically drywall and mesh. This was a place that they stood up so quickly, a for-profit place that was just trying to cut corners and trying to get this up running as quickly as possible without thinking about the safety of the community or what is right to do. Does anyone feel safe about a detention facility where the exterior wall is made of drywall? You know, it was clearly a mistake. It was clearly handled poorly. They were rushing it through, and that's why it needs to be shut down, and I hope it is. But that's why congressional oversight is important, because they're cutting corners, they're putting the communities at risk, and they're operating lawlessly throughout not just New Jersey, but the country. I mean, look what happened when they arrested, well, not just arrested, but handcuffed on the ground one of my colleagues, Senator Padilla in California. I mean, he was escorted into that press conference by an FBI agent and a federal marshal. They knew who he was, and they still arrested him. Any American should be able to say that that is not right. And if they're doing that to a U.S. citizen, to a U.S. senator, what would they do to somebody else?
Bit of a pivot here to Newark Airport. Growing concern about the functionality there. The runway has reopened, but limited flights for some time. For the very distant future, it appears. What can be done to get Newark back up and running, get maximum capacity?
Yeah, I talked to FAA leadership about this just the other day, and they did walk through in great detail about what they're doing to upgrade the systems for the telecom and others. So I feel much better about where this is going. They're saying that these should be done in about 2 to 3 weeks in terms of the upgrades. I told them they need to make sure that they're really publicizing that because they have done a lot to substantially increase that. There are also issues on the staffing side, which are getting better. So I'm going to stay on top of it because, you know, look, that's what we owe the people of New Jersey. And it's not just them, people all around the country that are flying through. They deserve to have confidence that they will be safe. But I would feel comfortable flying out of Newark. I would feel comfortable with my kids flying out of Newark. But we do need to make sure that we are finishing these fixes. We're getting it back up and running, and we can be able to just enjoy travel again without any type of concern. So it's getting better, and I think we're almost there where we can be able to look the people in the eye and say, you know, these things have been fixed. But again, I'm not going to take that for granted. I want to make sure we're following through on that.
Well, Senator, keep us posted on the progress there. We covered a lot of ground this morning, so we appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us today.